Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar all about CAB meeting engagement. We're going to kick it off in another 2 minutes after the hour to allow people time to join. Hello, hello. We're going to kick it off at 2 minutes after the hour. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Hi, everyone. We're going to give it another minute and then we'll get started. Welcome, everyone. In another 30 seconds, we're going to kick it off. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our CAB workshop, all about elevating CAB meeting engagement. So we are recording the webinar. We'll send it to you afterwards. Type any questions into the Q&A box and we'll answer probably at the end of the session. We've got a lot of content. So today's agenda, introductions. I'm Tatiana Falcone, VP Marketing at Ignite, and we're going to hear from my amazing colleague, Catherine Gibson, and she'll introduce herself shortly, and she's going to talk about the meeting engagement challenges we all face. Overview of that facilitator role. You know, what's the ideal skills to have? Planning for meeting engagement. A lot of this is key. The planning is key before your meeting. And then CAB meeting tips, like when you're actually at the meeting. And then obviously talking about engagement tips. And then engagement in between meetings. A lot of you asked, thanks for all of your questions that you submitted. We're not going to get to go through all of them, but a lot of people asked about how do you engage members in between meetings. And then we'll close out with Q&A and some resources. Here at Ignite, we're the only global firm dedicated to CAB. That's all we do. We've completed over 300 engagements, and many B2B companies use our industry best practices. We can help you create a board. We can help you optimize and assess your existing boards to improve them, and hire us to manage your in-person and virtual CAB meetings. So now we're going to start talking about CAB meeting engagement challenges, but first we want to launch a quick poll. So let me launch the poll. So you should see it on your screen. So what are your top CAB meeting engagement challenges? Finding the right person to facilitate, death by PowerPoint, we talk too much, or the company talks too much, getting more strategic versus tactical, effectively managing either dominant CAB members or those internal executives, silent members who don't say much, and if other, go ahead and type it in the chat. And I'll give it another.
More than once?
Say that again?
Can you vote more than once for more than one thing?
Oh yeah, of course. Of course, the people are dealing with many challenges. So I'll end the poll and share the results. So definitely the silent members who say nothing is very common, and that's also our experience, and Catherine's going to give you a lot of tips on that. Anything else on this, Catherine?
It looks like we've got a lot of death by PowerPoint too going on.
Yeah, that's very common. Very common. So you're in the right place. Thanks
Yes.
everyone for participating. So now I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you, Catherine. Let me just shut off my video.
All right, and I will take over the mouse. So hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Gibson with Ignite Advisory Group, and I'm delighted to be able to share with you today, give you some tips and tricks for maximizing your meeting engagement. I have been with Ignite for about a half dozen years now, and before that, I spent 10 years at AT&T running all of their customer advisory boards all around the world in different levels. And this is something I'm really passionate about, that I think in order to get customer insights and feedback to help make your company stronger. So, you know, we were just talking about some of the common challenges that we see and hear about from people and running cab or anticipating running a cab. And I'm a big believer of getting the architecture right from the get-go. So if those of you are Stephen Covey fans, my favorite habit is begin with the end in mind. So I think if you are creating something, do it right the first time so that you get your desired outcome and not just kind of kludgy it along the way. So in thinking about these in general meeting engagement challenges, what is the purpose of having a cab to begin with? So your purpose is to gather key customer insights and feedback. And so in order to do that, they could give you feedback on a whole lot of things, but you want them to be giving feedback on areas that are critical to you for your company's decision making, prioritization, et cetera. So the folks from your company who are involved in the meetings need to be able to clearly articulate what are the key questions that need to be answered, where's the areas of feedback that are needed. And then we design the sessions to get those answers to those key questions from your key customers here in an orderly and methodical way so that you can use them. Otherwise, what you're going to end up with are these challenges here on the screen, which really means that your meeting is either it's a one-way meeting, it's death by PowerPoint, or the worst is it's salesy. So I hopefully, as a result of today's time together, you're going to learn some things that will make sure that you have an effective cab meeting and not an ineffective one. So what does a best-in-class cab look like? You know, that begin with the end in mind. So here's a couple examples of what it's not. What it's not is one-way communication, which is pretty much what this webinar is. This webinar is not indicative of what a good cab meeting is. So the goal is for us to share a lot of information with you. This is not, we're not asking for your advice and guidance. So that's why this is definitely mostly a one-way out. We'll be doing 80% of the talking, if not more, to share that. So, and at the same time too, you're in a cab situation, if this is you, you're sharing things that are important to you, but may not be important to the cab members equally. So the next best version is there's two-way communication. And frequently when we see this happening, it is, they're like, oh, we want to hear from customers. So we're just kind of make it a free-for-all. We're going to have customers ask us questions. And so that the good news is it ups the engagement level from the membership. The bad news is it just doesn't seem clear. It seems kind of random about why are we talking about this subject? Maybe this subject's not at all important to your firm. Maybe it's taking you down a rabbit hole that's not strategic. So you're not you're not keeping the discussion at the right level, and you're not keeping it at a win-win for both you and the members. So what our goal is, our guiding light, is to get to the 80-20 rule, where 80% of the time you're hearing from the members and 20% of the time from the host company. And so we find that is where you're going to see that high engagement, that high value. That's where the agenda is co-created by you and the CAB members. So what's important to you, what's important to them, put those together. And that's the areas where you talk about. And then really during the meetings, you're focused on the peer exchange, successes, that one member starts asking questions of another member during the meeting, and there's some dialogue there. It's not just between member host company. And at the end as well, in order to have a successful CAB meeting, you need actionable insights that you're going to go back and work on before the next CAB meeting. So that's what we're striving for, is that 80-20 rule. And in order to get there as well and have a successful CAB meeting, there's some elements that you need to have. The first is a strong executive sponsor. If you do not have this, we might as well just call it a day. And I'm working with a large multinational right now who it's kind of they thought they had the executive sponsor, but it sounds like the executive sponsor was more like a political, like, oh, it's going to be that person, but that person never bought into it. And so if there's one thing you cannot do successfully with a CAB, this is not a grassroots effort. This is not a bottoms up, like, oh, this is a great idea. You need a clear executive who's going to own it and push things through. So if you don't start off with that, you're just kind of stuck. So that is super, super important. And then you need to understand why are we all here? Again, that begin with the end in mind. We say you've got to have a charter that describes what the CAB is going to do, what the members look like, levels, geographies, industries, etc. What's the expected requirements of activities from the members. If somebody asks me to join something, the first thing I say is, what am I committing to, etc. So you need to have that clear statement of what it is this group is going to do, what's expected from the members, what's expected from the host company, leadership involved. And then you need the right people in the room. So this includes both the members. So you need a group of peers, people who considers themselves peers in the industry. They don't have to have the same title, because titles are amorphous, but they need to feel like they have the same levels of responsibilities in order to keep the conversation at this level and not have it just get more and more tactical. You need session owners. We do not call them presenters, because presenters implies they're presenting stuff and not discussing things, strategic items. We don't want to get to that death by PowerPoint. So the people who are going to be leading the discussions, the discussion leaders, the session leaders. So are they the right people in the room to lead those pieces? And then you need to have a facilitator who's going to keep the meeting on track, run it make sure that you achieve the objectives. The next pieces are, you need a compelling agenda. And actually the last Ignite webinar that my colleague Nancy Trachtenberg was featured on was on that topic alone. And so Tatiana is going to share with you information about how to get access to that if you didn't have that already. If there's any pre-reading that needs to be done, make sure that is done and sent out in advance. Then, there's the meeting, and that's what we're going to talk about during the most of our slides today. And then the post-meeting follow-up. So it's not enough to just say, we're having a meeting, and then we had the meeting, right? You need to do something with that. You need to do something with, here's what we heard, here's what we're going to do next. And then you go off and do it and start the cycle all over again. So these are the prerequisites that are needed for a successful CAB meeting. With that ongoing engagement plan, again, the CAB is not just one meeting. It is a cycle. It's a circle. It's not an event. So we'll talk about that as well. So the facilitator role. What does a facilitator need to do? The facilitator needs to do a lot of things all at the same time. So in addition to managing the meeting according to the agenda and according to the desired outcomes, the facilitator needs to understand what's going on with the audience, with the people in the room, all at the same time. So they need to be listening for what people are saying. They need to observe how people are reacting. Are they engaged? Are they not engaged? They need to do active questioning to make sure that the advice is received from members, and do all of that at once. And as we know, it's much easier to do this in person than right now. Like, I can only see me. So all of that stuff that's nonverbal, I can't see any of this. So that's what makes virtual sessions so much harder, especially if people do not have their cameras on. Now, this is obviously set up differently where that's not a possibility, but I think it's really important to be able to understand what's going on in the room, be able to read the room as the facilitator. And it's kind of like the Maslow hierarchy of needs. If people are cold, if they're hot, if they're hungry, if they need a bathroom break, at that first level of needs in Maslow, they're going to stop paying attention. They're going to stop engaging. So it's important to know, maybe we need a stretch break. Maybe we need to just do something different, get people up and moving. Or no, we're not going to. And that's why it's always important to run the meeting according to the agenda, because people are mentally expecting, like, oh yeah, I'm going to have a break at noon, or I'm going to have a break at 4, etc. So that's really important to do that. So I've talked, I mentioned the facilitator, and I've mentioned the session owner as well. So really, what are each of them doing, and what do you need to look for in each of them? So facilitator, by definition, needs to be able to be an expert in running meetings. Sometimes I joke that I run meetings for a living, because that sounds really exciting, doesn't it? But to be able to run a compelling meeting that gets the desired outcome on time is definitely a skill. And for all of us who spend far too many hours in meetings every day, it's a welcome skill to have. But really, you're setting the stage and the culture to have an open dialogue. You want to hear from people, while again keeping things on track, because there's more content coming later, and you need to make sure you get through to all of it. And really, it's just managing the discussion to get a holistic view on what the members think the host company should be hearing about this topic, about this question, etc. The session owner always comes from your company. It may be somebody who's the subject matter expert, or it may just be somebody who can give the company's point of view on a certain topic. So, it doesn't really matter if it comes to it. The facilitator can even be a session owner. That's kind of something where we would step in if there was an emergency and somebody had to leave, and nobody else was able to do that, because the facilitator is also fluent in all of the content going on throughout the whole meeting, what the objectives are for the whole meeting. So the session owner is responsible for taking ownership of the insights gathered, the action items. And a really important thing that they do is at the end of their segment is they summarize what they heard, what they're going to do next. So it's active listening reflected back to the members to show that they heard what the members had to share with them. So that's really kind of the difference between the facilitator, who's running the whole meeting, the session owner, session leader, is responsible for a particular bit of the agenda. Why use a third-party facilitator like Ignite? I usually say, because we're not only do we have the skills and expertise to do this, but we're the Switzerland in the room. So we're able to say things to your customers. We're able to say things to your executives in a neutral fashion that you might be unwilling or concerned about saying to a customer or to an executive to make sure that the whole meeting continues to move and that we're getting the feedback that you're desiring to get. So it really gives the optimal experience when there's somebody not in either camp that's in the middle as neutral to be able to provide that for you. All right, so that's kind of the overview of the role of the facilitator. And again, we talked about the session owner, but let's kind of get into the meat of planning for the meeting engagement. All right, so when we think of planning for the meeting, we really think of it in 3 different tranches. So the first one is you're getting ready for the meeting. The second one is you're having the meeting. And the third one is what do you do after the meeting? So in the first piece of the meeting preparation and review, what you're really doing is you are, after you've co-created the agenda, here's where you come to the brass tacks of you create the relevant content to get the feedback needed to answer those key questions that the session owner comes up with. So we'll come up with various techniques, and I'll be sharing some of those in just a minute, of what we would do to get people's guidance and insight to answer those key questions for each of the sessions. And you'd also prepare the executive sponsor and the leadership team of the CAB to make sure everyone is in alignment and knows what we are trying to get out of this meeting and how we're going to go about it. During the meeting itself, the middle column, the facilitator obviously facilitates the meeting, but part of that is we set the ground rules for the members. We make sure so everyone knows how we're going to run the meeting and everyone's on the same page. I'll share more about that in a second. We allow for debriefing afterwards. And the most important thing is making sure everyone is given the opportunity to contribute. If every CAB can only have a limited number of members, and so if somebody is not attending or not speaking up, you have a wasted chair, because you can only invite so many people to attend to have an effective CAB. And then after the meeting, you want to come up with a summary report that highlights what were the key insights and what are the actions that are going to be taken next. And so that's really important that that's shared, one version internally, externally, that everyone can, again, stay on the same page. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, the pre-meeting, during the meeting, what happens after the meeting. So in that pre-meeting, how do we go about doing that? So what we do is after the executive sponsor identifies who will be the session owners, we start having meetings, the facilitator with the session owners. We usually start about 6 weeks out before the meeting. I like to have 3 meetings with each session leader. The first one, we kind of spend most of the time talking about what do you want to get out of it? What are the objectives going to be? What are the key handful of discussion topics? And then the next one, I'll come up with a plan for how we're going to get those questions answered. And it's kind of back and forth to finalize it by the third one. So, you need to have enough time and enough meetings. It's not like the thing you don't want to do is say, all right, like Pat Smith, you're the session leader, go put your deck together and send it to me when it's done. Because God knows what you're going to end up with. You're going to end up with death by PowerPoint. So you really need to keep it strategic. What are the key questions you want answered on this topic? What are the key insights you're looking to get? And then let's think about how we go and get those insights from the members during the meeting. And then before the meeting, if it's in person, ideally it's on site just before the meeting begins, that half day before. You want a dress rehearsal. So you're going to have everyone in the meeting who is from your host company who's attending the meeting. And then you want to run through the whole meeting. So first slide to the last, go through each session. This is what the goal is. You want to make sure everyone is on board of what's going to happen, what the key questions are that you're trying to get answered, and then put it all in, obviously, in one master deck that the facilitator would have, so that we don't have the let's switch things back and forth, etc. And you also have a chance to test the technology. So during that dress rehearsal as well, you want to put down the internal ground rules. I talked a few slides back about the external ground rules, which I'll address when we get to that in a minute. But we have to talk more pointedly internally, like what is expected, how they're expected to behave. So the first thing is, yes, let the cab members respond to each other. You know, we're here to hear their voices, not our voices. The second bullet is really the most key one. If it ever starts sounding salesy, people are not going to come back. It's here to listen, observe, ask clarifying questions, but not defending, not pitching, etc. No screens at the meetings. This one's harder to do, but I was in a meeting last week. The executive sponsor, person next to him starts picking up their phone. The customer on the other side starts picking up their phone. You know, as soon as people start picking up their phones, opening up their laptops, then you've lost their attention. And so, you know, our view is the only person with a laptop open should be the person taking notes, the designated note taker. And if you need to use your phone, if you need to text, just leave the room and go do that, make that phone call, return that email. But it just kind of shows that you're not paying attention if everyone from your host company is on their screens, because after all, you invited these key clients to spend time with you. The least you can do is give them your full attention. So it's kind of a Miss Manners thing, right? And there's only a small number of people who are allowed to attend this meeting from your company. So they need to have their butts in chairs the whole meeting. No, they can't just do a drive-by, like, I'm going to come in for this session and then I'm going to leave. Because again, the members will say, well, I flew here and I've spent the whole time here in this session. So why can't your people do that as well? So if they can't stay, you know, all right, I think you can make for a CEO, yes, I would make that exception, but everyone else would be like, why aren't you here? Why aren't you here the whole time? Because you asked me to be here the whole time. And then again, telling in this pre-meeting, the sessions, you're going to start each session with what are the objectives, close, that session leader is going to say, here's what I heard, here's the next steps. But wait, there's more. So during the pre-meeting, you're going to review all of the materials. You're going to also go into who's going to be there at the meeting. So what's the bios? Are there any key issues going on that you might need to have offline conversations about, or try to diffuse something before the meeting starts so it doesn't come up into the meeting. So, you know, that's really important to know who's going to be in the room and kind of their feeling about your company at that moment if something's happened. You know, document the key takeaways. We ask everyone from the host company for each session to kind of say, what are the 2 or 3 things that you heard? What were the key things that you heard in any action items? Because that will make it a lot easier on you to not have to put the whole thing together yourself, to kind of say like, oh, you know, this was a common theme. And so we want to make sure we capture that for the meeting output. And then that last bullet, really just to make sure that people are engaged in social activities and networking, because again, you're the host. And so you want to help develop the relationships between your company leadership and the members, because that's a big draw for the members to attend and be part of your CAB, is because of the relationships that they're building, both with each other and with your executives. So at Ignite, we recommend that every meeting is operated under the Chatham House rule. Now, the Chatham House is a group that's been in London for, I don't know, the 18 somethings. And I think their rule is much more famous than what that actual group is itself. But in essence, we put this up front at the beginning of every meeting, that the meeting is being run under the Chatham House rule. And in essence, what this quote says is, we will not identify any individual person or an individual company and anything that is written about the results of the CAB meeting. So it's kind of what we want to do is give people the ability to be as transparent as possible, because I'm not going to put in the meeting report, Tatiana said, or Ignite Advisory Group said, because people will be more hesitant to share because they're concerned about, ending up at the front page of the New York Times being quoted. So, that is something that we highly recommend, just to encourage transparency, encourage openness during the meeting itself. All right. So for virtual meetings, and we'll talk a bit about virtual meetings a couple times during this session this afternoon, is, it's very similar as when you're planning for the engagement of it. But there's just a few nuances that we wanted to highlight here. Because it is virtual, you're likely to see everyone's face on your Zoom or Teams or whatever you're using. But again, you want to come up with and share what are the discrete goals for each of those topics. But during the meeting itself, you want to make sure that it's one question at a time. You put that one question on the screen, because like anything, if you put up a slide and it has 3 questions on it, people are going to pick and choose which one they want to answer. It's just human nature. It's like, oh, I don't know those 2 things, but I have an answer for that one. And then you're missing out because you're not getting all the feedback you want on all the questions. So, ask one question at a time, write down the question, put it on the screen. I'm a visual person. So if I just hear a question, it's not going to percolate my brain as much as if I see it in writing. And for the overall session of that session, you're just going to want to do 3 or 4 questions, give it about 10 minutes per question on your agenda to run through it. And there's a variety of things we can do. We'll get into that a little bit later in this, of how to do some interaction during the meeting. And then it's, obviously you want to use your meeting technology. There's a lot of different things. We've already done polling here. And there's far more that you probably are using already, but chat box, raise hand, and really the important thing is just to have multiple things going throughout the meeting to keep people's interest going, so that they stay engaged, because it's really hard to do this on Zoom. I think we're all kind of over it by now. And so I'm really grateful that you are here and participating with us. But look for doing multiple touch points to get people's interaction. All right, so this is just back to meetings in general, not virtual specifically, but so we recommend using a variety of different techniques to get those key questions answered. And in general, we suggest that you don't overuse one. There's one client I have who loves breakouts, and so we do lots of breakouts, and for them that works really effectively. But in general, we would say try one thing for one session, a different idea for a different session, and to just keep everything fresh. So some of the things that we want to highlight here on this slide that we do recommend is it could be a case study that here we've had a problem or a new technology, and here everyone's talking about AI right now. So it could be you have one of your members talk about how they're using AI, how that works with your product, or just to solve a problem that people in this industry are having. Something large companies are having, whoever reflects the demographics in the room. So that can be really interesting, because again, the members all want to learn from each other. And then therefore, in learning from each other, you can learn from them about where you need to kind of hit that hockey puck toward. A panel discussion, we usually, a fireside chat. I've seen this used really effectively too, from the advanced members. Advanced could mean they've been with you for a while, or they're used you for a lot of stuff. There's a high level of trust and relationship, and it's just kind of like, it's a case study, but extended to multiple members at a time. And I've seen that used really effectively as well. We use voting a lot. I'm going to talk about that in maybe the next slide as well. Some ideas for that, and wall of ideas, which I call Post-its, that we get people to write down, on multiple Post-its, answer some questions, group them together. It's really great because it's a visual way of kind of representing, crowdsourcing what the answers are. So that's exciting as well. Working in pairs is great. It's kind of like, you've got 10 minutes, go answer these 2 questions, and then we'll discuss it. So that helps people develop their relationships. It also helps if people are quiet, to make sure we're hearing from everyone and not just a vocal minority. And then breakouts, I referenced those earlier. Breakouts are great for multiple reasons. If you are in meeting face-to-face, it really helps because you're getting everyone to stand up, move around, maybe change rooms, get a different scenery going. And so they're really working collaboratively in smaller groups to answer a set of questions. And then they come back and read out to everyone what their answers are. And people just really, really enjoy that. And I think we get a high quality output from the members from that. So I talked a little bit more about voting, polling. So this is just an interactive session idea on investment priorities. And frequently people would do this with respect to a roadmap that they're going to have. So their product roadmap. And then the number one mistake when people come and start talking about their roadmap is they kind of like, let me present to you the entire roadmap. And then, ta-da, all right, give me your input. Instead of really asking for questions about trade-offs, what's important, because we can't just change everything. Some certain things are set in stone. It could be like, this piece has to come out then, or it has to come out before this piece. There are orders that stuff has to go through, and you only have limited budget. You have conflicting priorities. Which should you do first? And so what we advocate is you take, if you're going to do something like this, you look at 4 to 8 kind of trade-offs, investments that you could make, and you could give people poker chips, you could give people dots, little sticky dots. You could give them Monopoly money. I done this in the UK. So you give them pounds, not real ones, but printed ones, but not good enough that we would look like we're copying people's currency. But it's, just the creative ways, and they can come in and vote. You can do multi-voting. It's like, all right, here's 8 things. I'm giving you 10 dots, as you can see kind of on the example on the right. You can spend that how you want. So it really gives you that instant visual. It kind of gamifies it, makes it fun. People can spend all their money on one idea, or they can disperse it around. And so then it gives you this visual cue, which is great for the meeting report afterwards. Take a picture of it, include that in there. So you see it right away, how people voted, and then have the discussion afterwards. The session leader should lead that part of the discussion about, well, why did you vote that way? Are we missing something? Did you come up with something new that wasn't even on our list? Kind of that last bullet of, are there any other investments that we should be considering? Another thing that, if you look closely, I'm actually in this picture, but that we did was take again, I was presenting a concept, and we got, it was like a little Rubik's pyramid, but you can just make this out of paper as well. and kind of like, all right, here's an idea. What do you think about this? And so you could just turn your pyramid toward the front of the room of what made the most sense. And it gave the session leader like everyone's quick and dirty view of if they liked the idea, if they needed to get more research on it, they weren't sure, or it was like, I don't know why you'd spend your time on this. It's not important to me. And then again, have the discussion. So it was super fun. Everyone in the room really enjoyed doing it. And I've done that more than once, but this is another kind of fun thing to do to get everyone's kind of immediate views. All right, so those are just some ideas that we have. We have a whole library at Ignite of ideas for meeting engagement and different things we can do. But those are some of our most popular ones that I see over and over again. All right, so CAB meeting tips. All right, so during the meeting, when you're kicking it off for the facilitators, you want to make sure you're explaining your role. You want to talk about the ground rules. One of the things we like to say in our ground rules is we want everyone to wear two hats, one as the company that they're representing, and one as an advisor, a strategic advisor to your firm. So don't just be, my needs. Let's take it up a notch and view it more strategically in how the members can advise you to be more successful and meet more needs of companies like them. So, we've talked about the session owners. They need to state the purpose, the desired outcomes from each session, provide introductory remarks for those sessions, just to puts everyone on a level playing field. So you might need a slide or two, but that's really it, to make sure everyone is on the same playing field to what it is that you're going to be discussing during the session. And then the facilitator will make sure everything stays on track to get the desired output within the time frame. So what we also ask people to do to make sure things stay on track is to avoid these scenarios. So I'll just go into them one-on-one. So for the session owners, the session leaders, we say, what we don't want to do is a customer ask a question and then say, I'm the session leader, I respond, and then say your executive sponsor answers, maybe their subject matter expert in the room, well, they answer too. It just really looks confusing about what's the right answer and why are so many people from your company talking to answer this question. Now, if I'm the session leader and somebody asks a question and it's out of my area of expertise, as the session leader, it's my I can certainly say, hey, Eileen, what is the you're really the expert here. Would you please answer that question? But what you don't want to do is just get everyone from your company start talking to answer. The session leader needs to retain control of their session and make sure only one employee responds to questions. I mentioned the sales pitch before. The quickest way to kill a cab is to make it salesy. So, that doesn't mean they can't be beta customers, they can't try out things, but if it starts sounding salesy, they're never coming back. And then the last one listed here, play ping pong. So what this is I'm the session leader and Tatiana makes a comment, I respond back, ask a question back to Tatiana, she responds back, I say another question to Tatiana. Pretty soon, everyone else in the circle in the U is going to say, well, I guess Catherine doesn't care about me. She cares only about Tatiana. And I've seen this happen, especially if it's for a customer who's very large and the company just is kind of being deferential, like, oh, you're my biggest customer, so I need to just keep engaging you. But then it makes everyone else in the room feel like, well, like they're not needed there at all. So if that happens, as a facilitator, you've got to jump in and make sure that you say, okay, well, thank you. I've heard Tatiana's view. Like, are there other opinions in the room that are different, or do you all agree with her? So it's really a matter, again, of making everyone feel welcome. All right, other common challenges that you have experienced. We've all experienced both of these. The quiet ones, the silent cab members. Not everyone feels comfortable speaking up in a group, even if the group is only 15 to 20 people in a room. So part of it is we want to be able to make sure they've thought of the questions ahead of time. So being able to share in advance, here are the questions that are going to be asked, because sometimes it's out of people's areas that it could be somebody on their team who manages this topic. And so being able to go and ask, they can go and ask feedback from their team members, like, oh, I don't run this part of the business. I've got somebody on my team doing it. So let me ask for their specific input. So that's one way everyone can come equipped to answer the questions. But really, I think finding other techniques to be able to hear everyone's voice, whether it's breakouts, whether it's the doing stuff in pairs. One thing, that fourth bullet, gather feedback from all. So one way to go is literally go around the room and you hear everyone's answer to a specific question. Super effective. Do not use it more than once in a meeting. Save that for one time during a meeting, because otherwise everyone's going to like, oh, we're going around the room again. So super effective, but you be really targeted how you use that. And then kind of that alone time, individually writing ideas, we call it brain writing. So that's like, here, think about this question for a minute, write down your answer, and then bring it in for a conversation. Dominant members, on the other hand, they're kind of more harder to actively manage during the meeting. And that's where you just have to, your facilitator has to be able to skillfully interject, as it says here, and kind of stop that flow of conversation. There's at least one in every cab who just loves their own voice and likes to talk a lot. So you need to acknowledge those comments and just kind of say, yep, thank you, Pete, for sharing with that. What do other members in the room have to think about this? Virtual meeting tips. Keep an eye on the clock as well. So here's for internally, when your internal prep session, cameras on, smile, keep up the energy, leave airtime for people to respond, be comfortable with silence, remind people it's not a webinar. You're not just doing a one way out. You want some interaction back and forth. And as I learned from a national park ranger, ask a question, wait for 10 seconds before moving on. Somebody is going to fill the void. 10 seconds seems like a long time when no one's talking, but I thought that was a great tip. So for putting together your virtual meeting agenda, everyone is tired of sitting in virtual meetings, so keep it to 2 hours and no more than 2 topics. Again, facilitator covers the ground rules like we do before. Encourage everyone to turn on their cameras, conduct a roll call so everyone knows who's there. And we want to ask a quick question so we break the seal. Breaking the seal means everyone's talked. Once people talk once, they're more likely to speak again. So it could be like, what's your number one strategic priority, or what's a challenge you're anticipating in the next 3 months or next 12 months? Just put a time limit on that, because it could last the whole duration of the meeting if you do not do that. Throughout the meeting, if somebody joins late, say like, oh, hi, Gina, thanks for joining, and move on. You don't have to do anything more. Here's one area, because people are virtual and you can't read the room as well as in person. don't put anyone on the spot, because they might be multitasking. They might be like down here with their phone and up here with their face. And so don't put anyone on the spot and call out any one individual, but you've got to actively probe, cajole, really, come up with different ideas to get response. So you ask for advice, you ask where people are agreeing, where do they disagree with what's being said, what's feedback that they have on the topic. So it takes really active participation from the facilitator to get that. A virtual meeting breakout works very similarly to an in-person one. You've got to have what the clear questions are. We always pre-assign groups, but for virtual, that makes it easier because you just zoom out to your various breakout rooms. There's always a customer leader. I assign that up front, and I just say you're the lead, so that people don't spend time wasted of figuring out who should be the leader and do the readout at the end. You can put a host company people in the breakouts as well to be observers, but not to participate proactively. And there's a lot of different collaboration tools, Miro, Google Jamboard, that really have helped make this much easier to do. So, and then there's an example of an agenda for a virtual meeting as well. Okay. All right, engagement between meetings, our last big topic before Q&A. So the important thing about a CAB, it's not a one-time event. It is not an event. Do not ever call it that. It is a continuous engagement with a set of key clients to get your feedback. So you don't want to just meet once a year and just say, all right, have a nice life. We'll see you in a year again. We'll be in touch with you, a couple months before the meeting to do member interviews and start talking about what's important to you that you want to talk about. We really encourage you to stay engaged with them throughout the year. And so it could be a quarterly call with the members. You would run that like a virtual meeting, could just be an hour, could be 2 hours. I wouldn't go any longer than that. Any early input on any company updates or product updates, yes, you would send it out to them. You might have a call around it to introduce it. I talked about the preparation for the next meeting to do the customer interviews. And there could be some special things that you would do, webinars for them, white papers with something with an industry leader. So something to continue to make them feel special and that they're not just the everyday client that you have. They're in a special spot. And then we also have successful examples of doing working groups. We used to do this at AT&T a lot, especially for individual products and launches and coming up with new ideas. And they may not be the members who would show up to your regular meeting because they're more the subject matter expert from your clients' companies. But there could be a discussion that comes out and we're like, oh, we want to delve into this further. And so I'm going to participate on this sub team, or I'm going to nominate somebody in my organization to participate on that. So that's a great way of kind of, if you need active customer engagement to flesh out that idea before the next meeting, that's a great way to do it. All right. And always remember to take advantage of your CAB members and using them for your customer advocacy. We always have on our feedback forms, actually, are you interested, would you participate in speaking engagements and press opportunities and press releases and testimonials, success stories, and people check or, so it's like, oh, I need a speaker at a conference I'm hosting, or I need to do a customer reference program, or, whatever it is. This should be your first group of people that you leverage for those customer advocacy bits. All right, Tatiana, we got to Q&A.
Awesome, yeah.
All right, that was fast during the end, so I appreciate everyone keeping with me.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. I've been typing out answers to several questions, but here are some that I didn't get to.
Okay.
So Erica is asking about the recommended time length for a meeting. I'm not sure if, I think you were talking about in person, so we could cover in person and virtual. And then referencing the 2-hour max, does that also include a networking activity?
Okay.
Or virtual? That was a
Yes.
virtual.
All right, I'm going to answer the virtual one first. So the 2-hour max, no, and what I've seen, because a lot of people are dealing with people in multiple time zones, and sometimes they do the networking activity like the evening before. It doesn't necessarily need to be at the same time as the meeting. Just kind of like if you were having a welcome reception, that would be the evening before the meeting. So I think it's a way people, I've seen people do, like, wine tastings and cheese tastings and various things that are hosted. So that would not include that. And you would only need to have that social event kind of if you're only doing a virtual meeting. If you're doing a face-to-face meeting, you don't, the quarterly meetings or 2 other virtual meetings you do a year, you don't need a social event associated with those. The planning for the meeting, and I'm not sure if the planning is how much in advance should you plan for, which I assume in the CAB agendas, that part was probably covered, or is it how long should the meeting last for? Which is probably also.
Yeah, it wasn't the specific planning, but she followed up that her meetings are virtual, but
okay.
It was, the time length for the meeting, the duration of the meeting. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, but really try to keep it to 2 hours. You're just going to lose people mentally, maybe if not physically. Again, we recommend starting planning out 6 weeks in advance for the actual putting the pieces together of the meeting. And then virtual couple hours, face-to-face meetings. We typically see a day, some do a day and a half. Sometimes if you're just kicking off and you're doing it with another event, it might just be half a day. It depends.
Thank you. Here's another question about breakout sessions. For our very first CAB, we've been advised to keep the members together, no breakouts, maybe until the second CAB. So this will help with networking and build strong CAB from the beginning and everyone hearing the same conversations. So what are your recommendations? Well, I would always recommend breakouts, but
yeah. Because it gives people a chance to network in a small group. That's you don't just become best friends with 20 people. You become friends with a handful of people at once, and start developing that trust and relationships. So, and when you're organizing the breakouts, you have to think about how you're going to do it as well. Is it just random, which could be easily? You might want geographical answers. So you put people from different geographies together, different industries together. Or you could have like some bigger customers and some smaller customers. So you could group those together. So it's really kind of thinking like, would the feedback be better if I get it from a certain way? And so because after the breakout, the teams come back together in the meeting room or virtual or physical. And then the leader of that breakout gives the 2 to 3 minute kind of synopsis of the team's answers and why they answered it that way. You get a much stronger viewpoint, and frequently we're like, wow, we all kind of came up with a similar thing. Well, that shows it's gold. Like that's a pretty good bet that you're hitting the right track there. If you have 4 teams and you come up with 4 different answers, it might be murkier to figure out what your next way forward is. So I would push for the breakout. I would really push for the breakout.
I agree with you, Catherine. Even if it's the first meeting, I think I agree with you. All of your comments.
And it keeps the energy. It really keeps the energy in the room as well.
So we're getting a lot of good questions here, but we're running out of time. But someone's asking about recruitment.
Yeah.
Should it be existing clients versus prospective clients?
Yes, that's easy. Yes. Prospects can't give you feedback on your company, on your products, on your service, because you don't know what you're going to end up talking about. But we like to keep things strategic, but it's going to, at some point in the meeting, you're going to be talking about that. And if there's stuff that's weird with anyone, you don't want to be poisoning the well, right? So if somebody's having an issue, you don't want to be like, oh, well, I don't know if I want to do business with that company after all. So yes,
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I also agree with your statements there. So we're at the top of the hour here. Thank you so much, Catherine. If definitely we have some resources for you. You can schedule a free CAB evaluation with an Ignite CAB expert. We'll discuss your advisory board needs and provide recommendations. And we have a library of resources, webinars, workshops, and newsletters at igniteag.com/resources. Thank you everyone for joining. And last words, Catherine.
Keep focused on the customer. It's really, really important, and it's going to make your company more effective and more successful.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.